Hello, and welcome to Nothing Ever Happens in Canada, but we know this is simply not true. This is a Canadian podcast looking to explore the myths, legends, and just good old stories Canada has to tell. I'm Canadian Girl. Our venture takes us to Saskatchewan, to a very small town known as Langenburg. Found in the southeast corner of the province, just 15 kilometers west of the Manitoba border. With a population today of 1,165, back in 1974, when our story takes place, there was only about 800 people. It's also very cold when our story takes place, so do grab some mitts, a hat, and do your coat up as high as you can, as we're off to explore the south end of the Fur Farms field in Langenburg, Saskatchewan, on Tuesday, September 1st, 1974, in the early morning to visit the most famous UFO landing site in the province. Our story begins 45 years ago on a cold morning in September 1974. It's the first day of the month, and Edwin Fur, who is 36 years old, has just received a phone call from his brother saying that frost is on the way for this evening in the forecast, so the canola field will have to be harvested right away. Edwin quickly threw on his winter coat, grabbed a hat, the ones you know with those flaps on the side that you can pull over your ears, and headed out to the east end of their field that still needed to be finished. The Fur family's farm was located just 70 kilometers south of Yorkton, Saskatchewan, in the town of Langenburg. Edwin hopped into his swather, which is a large tractor with a piece of equipment on the front of it similar to that of a combine. It is used to harvest the canola. Around 10:30 a.m., he would roll up on a slough in the east corner of his field, which was basically like a bog or a marshy type of land. He noticed something shiny and metallic located just on the edge of the slough. He immediately thought someone had dumped junk in the field, or perhaps another thought crossed his mind. It might be a turkey or duck blind. He had heard of hunters setting them up along the fields. Or he thought it was some kind of joke. He parked his tractor, leaving it running idle, and approached the metallic object. To his surprise, there was actually two more along the edge of the slough, making 3 in total. He got about a foot away from them, and he could see that the 3 of them were hovering above the grass and rotating at a very high speed. He stated that the surface looked shiny, almost like a brushed metal or polished steel. They also looked like they had a thick metal belt around the bottom of the shiny dome, as if the metal belt was holding it all together. He noticed the grass spinning underneath the machines, as he called them. Edwin had never seen or heard of a UFO until this day. To him, these were just some strange machines he had never seen before. He said that he watched the grass spin underneath for almost 2 minutes, and the whole time, they never made a sound. They had no windows and were roughly 5 feet high at the peak of the dome. There was no antenna, moving parts, and the bottom of the machine was very flat. He said there was a very powerful wind coming from underneath them, as he had to hold onto his hat as he approached. The machines were spinning counterclockwise, and the grass was spinning clockwise. They were going in opposite directions. Next, he remembered being overcome by fear, almost like when you reach your hand into a fan or really sharp machine, you know to pull your hand away. That's what Edwin said he felt. His instincts told him to stay away from it. He crept slowly back to his tractor, and he did not turn his back on the machines hovering in the slough. He was too scared to take his eyes off them. He hopped back in his tractor and immediately tried to leave the area, but his tractor was completely stalled out. He tried to start the engine again. Edwin knew he had left his tractor running, and now it was completely dead. The engine would not even turn over. In panic, Edwin began to look around and became even more alarmed. To his right and left, he saw another machine on each side, making now a total of 5 strange machines hovering around him in his field, with a tractor that would not start. The three in front of him at the sluice edge were bigger, and the two on his right and left were a bit smaller, he claims. Edwin says he froze in fear. He couldn't do anything. He would tell the newspaper, the Regina Leader-Post, in September 2017, it was like being in a daze. Then after about 15 minutes to half an hour, the machine simply took off into the northeast sky, one after the other, straight up into the air, emitting a gray cloud of smoke from the 4 exhaust pipes Edwin claims to have seen when the craft took off above him. He said they flew away so fast, if you blinked, you would have missed them. Edwin will often clap his hands when telling this part of the story. Side note, you can find countless interviews that have been done online. You should definitely check him out. He seems like a really genuine guy. After the machines took off, Edwin took a good 5 minutes to build up the courage to get back out of the tractor and see what the heck had happened, which I don't blame him at all. Looking around once more to make sure the machines had left, Edwin once again got out of his tractor and heads over towards the slough. He felt the grass to see if it was hot. There was nothing, he said. You couldn't feel or smell anything. It's like they were not even there. Almost. 5 ring, circle-like patterns could be seen in the field. The grass in the center of each of these circles was standing perfectly untouched, but everything else around it had been flattened down clockwise. Edwin headed back to his tractor, and this time it started no problem at all. He headed back to the farmhouse for lunch, where his mother scolded him for being late, but along with his wife Karen, quickly knew something was wrong. He tried to tell the story, fumbling over his words and not knowing what to say he had actually saw, when his dad looked over his newspaper from a chair in the living room and asked him if he had seen a flying saucer. What? Edwin quickly asked. He had never heard of them before. His father would explain and say that he'd been reading about them for years now in the German papers, and that they were known to be flying around Canada and other foreign countries. Not knowing what to do, they contacted their local police, who contacted the RCMP. They would send out Ron Morier, who at the time was 27 years old. He would arrive at the fur farm just shy of 1 week after the incident had occurred, after receiving a call from the Langenburg detachment. He went out to the field and found 5 circles that fit accurately with what Edwin had described he had seen. Morier's report states that the circles were approximately 18 inches on the flattened portions, and 2 of the 5 circles had a diameter of 12 feet and the other 3 were 10.5 feet in diameter. He would also take his own photos and measurements. They were sent to the National Research Council in Ottawa. The photos can be seen in a link below, along with many other great pictures of the event and Morier's report. There was no path to the circles as if someone had made them, so he quickly ruled that out. Morier is quoted as saying to the newspaper, the Regina Leader, "They came from the sky, and they left the same way, leaving no trail." He also noted Edwin to be a quiet, church-going farmer, not the type to lie or seek attention, and that Edwin seemed genuinely scared of what had happened. The RCMP officer actually believed him, which is very rare in these cases. Morier would take a lot from his colleagues for believing this tale. They would jokingly call him Officer Mulder after the investigation in his later years. A headline at the time from the Newfoundlander would state, "RCMP officer convinced UFOs are real." Morier would go on later to work for the show America's Most Wanted as a consultant. Today, he is retired and lives in Winnipeg, where he keeps a binder full of newspaper articles, photos, letters, and more of the event. One interesting thing found in that old binder? Dr. J. Allen Hynek's business card. He was said to be involved in the incident at some point. He even spoke to the media and sent a representative to study the site. Dr. J. Allen Hynek was one of the UFO field's most famous researchers and worked as a scientific consultant for the U.S. government's secret program at the time known as Project Blue Book, which was known to investigate UFOs. RCMP officer Ron Mourier is quoted as saying, "This investigation was one of the best times of his life." The sighting would come at a time when UFO sightings around the world were starting to slow down, leading some to believe this is why this one got so much attention when others do not. When the event happened, it was reported in the media and around the globe. Within days, there were cars lined up all the way from the town of Langenburg to the fur farm property. Everyone wanted to see Saskatchewan's now famous landing site. Its estimated crowds of about 3,000 people a day were arriving at the farm. It was harvest time on the farm. People and tourists were getting in the way of work that needed to be done. It was a lot of chaos for the small community. Rumors would spread quickly, and farmers were scared to work in their fields. The Center for UFO Studies, located in Illinois, sent a specialist to the farm. He could not find any reason to dispute Edwin's claims. The Air Force, Navy, and Army personnel all showed up to take their own pictures and measurements. A plane carrying Australians would even fly over and land in an adjacent field to come take a look. RCMP officers came with many dogs, and none would go anywhere near the circles because they knew better. Turns out, soil samples were not taken until way too late, after everyone had already walked through the area, and when all the soil samples came back, they were highly radioactive. Scientifically, the only thing found that remains a mystery was an intriguing black substance found by the National Research Council, but they could not draw any conclusions from it. After all the experts' opinions and facts presented to many different councils on the event, it was eventually classified as a close encounter of the second kind due to the circles being left behind in the field. Edwin's father became so sick of all the attention, he went out to the east corner of the field and lit it on fire, trying to erase any signs of the occurrence. Unfortunately, it did not work. The markings could still be seen, and the crowds kept coming to see them. Edwin knew for sure something unique had happened that day, because you don't send that many government officials from so many different agencies to look at nothing. The days and weeks after the event, their phones never stopped ringing. Everyone wanted to hear the tale. Edwin even received a phone call from astronaut Neil Armstrong. He claims to have spoke to him for over 2 hours. He says Armstrong told him that astronauts did indeed see UFOs on their way to the moon, but were told not to tell the public as it would create mass panic and fear. Edwin said he accepted that people were curious and tried to be as accommodating as he could be. He says he still gets the odd phone call now and again, and he's been telling the exact same story for years, adding to his credibility. He's known to answer questions to anyone who asks, and he still lives in Langenburg today. His story has been featured on the History Channel in a documentary about UFOs, and this is one of the most documented UFO cases in Canadian history. The land today where the sighting happened still receives visitors. The farm is now run by Edwin's nephew, who wants nothing to do with the story. So when he sees people searching for the site, he tells them he has no idea what they're talking about. It's a secret that does not want to stay hiding though. The circles can still be seen today, as the crops grow in a strange circle pattern still. You can check it out for yourself in the YouTube video I've linked down below. It's the video with the half-hour interview with Edwin, done by the Finding UFO channel. At exactly 18 minutes into the clip, you can see these strange circles and how they still look today. Edwin has always said, you can't plan these things, they just happen. And it actually did again. In 1989, the machines would return to a schoolyard in Langenburg where kids were out for recess and a teacher was also out keeping watch. The teacher said the objects were exactly as Edwin Furr had described them. The children were quickly ushered back into the school, and the machines vanished in seconds just as they did before. I'm Canadian Girl. Until next time.